Koreans didn't have slaves. We didn't fly.
Did Koreans have slaves?
Korea had the longest unbroken chain of slavery of any society in history.
Slavery has existed in nearly every civilization in some form or another throughout all of history. Whether it is directly called slavery, serfdom, indentured servitude, or something else, we can all agree that owning another human being as one would an object is slavery, regardless of the purposes and circumstances. Although Korea has had a long history of being enslaved by other countries, that is not the focus of this video, as they themselves have committed slavery in their history. Actually, just leaving it at that is kind of downplaying the actual truth. As many of you probably found out when Bobby Lee did, and sadly when I did, Korea has had the longest continuous period of slavery in all of history that we know of. What's most interesting, however, is how this Nobi system is different from most other systems throughout history. I want to explore why this is, what perpetuated the system, and how it finally came to an end officially only around 100 years ago. But most importantly, to shed light on a topic that nearly no one knows about, including myself until recently. If you like to hear me talk about slavery, that came out wrong. Shut up, Trey, I don't want to hear it. If you like this video, please subscribe, as I'd like to do more of these video essay style videos in the future. I know it's very different from my normal zombies content, but I never said I'd only do zombies videos. Plus, I gotta earn the Korean title in some way, and I wanted to make a shorter video for once. I might as well do both these things at once by talking about some of the worst parts of my people's history. Oh, and let me know in the comments of any topics you'd like to see next. And sorry if my voice sounds a little different, I am sick. But I wanted to record this anyways. Without further ado, 여러분, 많이 감사합니다. 그래도, back to slavery. Don't take that out of context, please. The Nobi is the name given to the slave class found in Korea primarily during the Goryeo and the Joseon Dynasty. Now, that one statement is filled with many questions, so here's a quick rundown on the history of Korea. The Goryeo Dynasty is not important to our story. All you really need to know about it is that essentially it's the delivery room of Korean slavery. We don't know the exact birth date for our little problem child. And to be fair, the Goryeo Dynasty began in 918 AD. The Goryeo Dynasty is interesting in the fact that it is actually where the word Korea came from, and established modern-day Korea as a country by effectively unifying the three kingdoms of Korea. Whatever. I'm not giving a 101 class on Korean history. But this is important for you to understand because since this is so long ago, and this time period was busy for the people of Korea, records are, I'll be frank, non-existent. And the records that do indicate the Nobi system during this time are conflicting on when exactly the system started and why. Some even indicated that it existed before this dynasty. The main theory is that it just came about one day as a way to punish those who did not pay back debts to wealthy individuals, landlords, politicians, and the like. But I wanted to get that out of the way to answer the big question of how it started, and in summary, we don't know exactly. Sorry if you wanted comprehensive answers, don't come to some random guy's YouTube channel if that's what you're looking for. Now, onto what really matters, the Joseon Dynasty. This period of time was from 1392 until 1910, and during this time, Korea had 4 hierarchies of individuals. The Yangban, known as the nobles, the Chungmin, the middle class, the Yangmin, the common people, and the Chonmin, the lowest people. Side note, multiple wikis actually call the common people, I refer to them as the Yangmin. They sometimes the wikis refer to them as the Sangmin, but Professor Bokre Kim refers to this class of people as the Yangmin, so I'm more inclined to believe the professor over this wiki. But if I'm wrong, let me know. Notably, the Nobi were so low that they were not explicitly included in this hierarchy system as people, but instead more as an indicator of one's wealth. See, the Nobi actually were a part of the Chonmin and the Yangmin, but they weren't really included because, well, I mean, you can guess, they're not really counted as people. You became a Nobi quite simply, really. Once you owed a great debt to either the government or a private individual, you were officially a nobi, and you and your family would be distributed like land to your owners and their descendants until this was abolished in 1731. The descendants part, not the actual slavery, that wasn't abolished till much later. Other than being immensely depressing to talk about, it's actually very interesting to note that there were two different types of nobi, both the publicly owned by the government, known as the Kwan nobi or the Kong nobi, and the privately owned Sa nobi, usually by those of the Yangban or the Chungin, though it wasn't unheard of for those of the lower system to also own nobi. This goes to show that Korea not only had slaves for the longest time in history, but that they were a society run by slavery for the longest time in history. This distinction is important because it explains how the nobi system existed and perpetuated for so long with little to no incidents of uprising. See, the nobi themselves took up around 30% of the entire Korean population. That's an insane ratio. A comparable ratio to today would be if the entire population of California, Texas, and New York were all slaves. So, how did the rich get away with this? Well, back in those days, the only way to become wealthy and stay wealthy was to flaunt your two possessions, land and, ding ding ding, you guessed it, slaves. See, the nobi did your farming, your groundskeeping, and everything in between for you, hence why the government had so many slaves. The nobi literally kept the government running for little to no cost. And since owning slaves was seen as a status symbol, many people, even all the way down to the Yangmin, owned slaves of their own. Many of the nobi were even brainwashed by the rich in the system, as they were often labeled as Korea's people, yet at the same time also not allowed to own land, marry between different classes, and so much more like normal people could. But, hooray, they get to pay taxes. That's right, a slave was forced to pay taxes. Now that sounds like a bad thing, and it is, and it's even more ridiculous by the fact that the nobi really just made pennies, if anything. But let's move on to why this matters. I want you to think about it this way. If you were born and raised not into an individualistic society like America, but a community-centric society that treated you like an object, talked about you like an object, but then told you get to contribute to the society directly as a person, you would feel like that you're actually finally a part of something as a human being, that you're actually part of a bigger whole. Now, I'm not saying everyone thought this way, and really it's just speculation, but if you were stuck in the bottom of a well for your entire life, wouldn't you bask in the light every time the sun shined above you? By constantly giving the nobi people small glimpses of humanity in the eyes of the general public, it would soothe any thoughts of uprising or revolting. Plus, it's not like there wasn't a way out. It was nearly impossible, but you could pay off your debts owed to the government or your owners and become a free man. Plus, during times of crisis, such as the many times the Japanese or Chinese invaded or controlled Korea, the government would free en masse many nobi in exchange for military service. And this leads me into the second reason why the system was perpetuated. Korea was constantly on fire, both literally and figuratively. Like I stated before, the country itself started due to the unification of the original three kingdoms of Korea, which was hectic in and of itself. But then the Joseon Dynasty started due to a coup d'etat, which completely changed the entirety of Korea, not as a country, but as a society, changing not only their economy, but the way they approached science, global economics, and even language, as this was when the modern Korean alphabet, Hangul, was created. It should be noted that the nobi system was one of the things that didn't change, but whatever. Then, when things are finally calming down, a bunch of people tried invading Korea starting in 1592 all the way until 1637. I'd say a bunch of people, but it was really mostly Japan. And after this all went down, Korea decided to shut in on itself and ignore the outside world completely. It's hard for a class of slaves and indentured serfs to find hope when they don't know of a world that doesn't have a slavery system. And then, after all of that, Japan took over Korea again shortly before and during World War II. Needless to say, Korea didn't really have the time to sit with a governmental system long enough to really ponder the moralities of what they were doing, especially considering for most people, it worked, unfortunately, hence why I kept going. That's not me justifying it, by the way. That's just what I think the thought process went in into why it perpetuated so long. Don't get me wrong, it's still wrong as hell. Finally, now that you know essentially who the Nobi were, what Korea basically looked like from a higher level, and why the system was perpetuated, we can finally talk about what we care about. Uprising, baby! It's impossible to have slavery without uprising, and let's be honest, like a crash in NASCAR or a fight in hockey.
That's what we've been waiting for!
So, what noteworthy slave uprisings happened in Korea? Well, I may have lied a little. There's not really any. Sure, there was like one or two here or there. I'm sure there were hundreds, just none that were specifically noteworthy or that were really noted in historical records. Which, to be fair, historical records are mostly going to be made by the nobles, the upper class, people that can read and write. Not a lot of the lower class people can really know how to do that until Hangul became more popular and more widespread. But again, we're going back into Korean history there. Some uprisings are touched by Professor Bokre Kim's books, and well, specifically in the portion of the book Slavery and Resistance in Africa and Asia. But overall, Korea never really had an underground railroad or anything so dramatic like in America. And Korean slavery mostly went away with a whisper rather than a bang. As the world became more modern, the cycle of slavery wouldn't last forever. Now, around the 1700s, a large influx of runaway slaves started occurring, and it got so bad that the government had to start taking measures to stop people from pursuing runaway slaves so harshly. After all, if you had police in nearly every single Yangban household chasing your slaves every single day just so you can punish or kill them, you'd be eating away governmental resources, time, and, people's lives. And although the system of slavery was slowing down, it still wouldn't be until 1894 that the Korean government ruled that the Nobi system be abolished. And this is only really due to the global shift to different types of currency, most countries, even Japan, having borders open due to the world, mostly America and Europe, and so much more worldwide societal changes happening. Well, I should say, it was abolished officially, anyway. See, many individuals actually continued this tradition even into the Japanese occupation and annexation of Korea from 1910 to 1945. And there were even still some reports of Nobi existing during the Korean War, which began in 1950. This means that less than 75 years ago, there were still slaves being owned in Korea. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't doubt if there was still at least a single person owned by another in a lesser visited, poorer part of Korea. So really, never think that slavery is so long ago that it could never happen to us today. Korea may have officially ended their slavery system around 100 years ago, but Korea is hardly the start of slavery, nor the end, as there are confirmed cases of slavery around the world now. So, if you can take anything from this video, just know, don't judge a country on their history. Judge them for how they are making history now. Because who knows? You might just discover that your country has the longest unbroken chain of indentured servitude or slavery of any society in history. Special thanks to the following people. Professor Bokre Kim for their chapter titled Korean Nobi Resistance under the Joseon Dynasty, 1392 to 1910, in the book Slavery and Resistance in Africa and Asia, and their chapter titled Nobi, A Korean System of Slavery, in the book Structure of Slavery in Indian Ocean, Africa, and Asia. They really know their stuff on Korean slavery, and they were also the main source for my research. Also thanks to Dr. Sunju Kim for helping to fill in the gaps in any of my research through their various written works. Many wiki pages are also I'm very thankful for helping fill some of the narrative gaps in Korean history that I was missing. And, of course, the Bad Friends podcast with Andrew Santino and Bobby Lee for bringing millions of people's attention onto the existence of the Nobi, myself included. Thanks so much for watching as always. It means the world to me. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. 그리고 다음에 봐요. 다음은 언제든지 했어요.